So thank you all for being here. It looks like there's 44 people in this room, which is fantastic. And thank you so much for inviting all of us to participate in the conference. It's brilliant. So we're here for an hour and a half, and you've come to the discussion about upscaling regenerative urban food production in the context of COVID and the climate emergency. We've got 5 speakers, Jeremy Iles from Green Future Associates and the Urban Agriculture Consortium. I work coordinating the Urban Agriculture Consortium, which is a UK project with Jeremy. Then we also have Elizabeth Westaway, Gary Mitchell, Nick Weir and Kim Stoddart in that order, and I will let them introduce themselves. They're all bringing different kind of strands of expertise and insight into this question about regenerative food production. So I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping, and each of the speakers will have a kind of 10-minute slot, and they'll speak for about 6 or 7 of those, and we'll invite a question or 2 for that speaker at the end of their little slot. And so I invite you to type your questions for those speakers into the chat, and then I'll pull out 1 or 2 depending on how much time we have within their 10-minute slot. Just the usual Zoom etiquette to stay muted unless you're speaking. I think we all have the capacity to mute and unmute ourselves. I think that's it. You can also minimize the row, or the little boxes, the gallery bit of participants on, which should be on the right hand of your screen. You can minimize that when the slides are showing, so that you can see everything that's on the slides. A couple of people will have slides. So yes, this is such an important, critical subject, and we're very much all part of an incredible movement that is gaining momentum by the day in this critical time of sort of converging crises and converging opportunities. So do if you're social media savvy, we're using the hashtag WRFFC20. So please do ping stuff out as you see fit. Also feel free to use the chat in any way you want to share any links or anything that arises throughout the talk. So I will. What I'd really like to invite you to do first of all is to just put into the chat who you are and something about why you're here and what you're interested in this session. So just fire away, start piling it into the chat. I will, and everyone can read everyone else's, so we get a sense of who's in the room. And that would be great. And make sure that you're sending the chat to everyone, so we can all see who we all are. That would be lovely. And just while you're doing that, I'll just say a couple more things about the Urban Agriculture Consortium, and Jeremy will talk a bit more about that in a moment. At the moment, the project is running for 3 years, and we're looking at, funded by Esme Fairbairn, and we're looking at building up a kind of weaving of a network of collaborations to look at how we kind of upscale and increase regenerative agriculture in urban and peri-urban spaces. So we've started it sort of in the summer, and we're still in the still birthing it. But we have an amazing sort of core oversight group, Nick and Gary are part of that, who help steer the whole thing. It's really about kind of unlocking opportunities and seeing where we can add value to accelerate the amazing work that's already going on to transition to a more localised regenerative food system. So that's, in a very, very small nutshell, a bit about Urban Agriculture Consortium, and I will hand over to Jeremy to say, first of all, to say a bit more about that, and keep your intros coming into the chat. Over to you, Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks, Maddie. None of us are Welsh speakers, so I apologise for that. Some of the speakers are actually in Wales, which is great, 3 of them, and 2 of us are in Bristol, which is just over the water, and one's in Stroud. So although we're not in Wales, we're there spiritually, I think. I've been around a long time in the environmental movement since the mid-80s, and I've worked for a variety of organisations, from Wildlife Trusts to Friends of the Earth and Sustrans, and then I spent 16 years at the Federation of City Farms and Community Gardens, and had the privilege, I think you could say, of travelling right across the UK to community growing projects, allotments, city farms, but also at the other end of the scale, working at government level with working groups, both in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and in England, funnily enough. And I've actually done presentations at the CYNHADLEDD in Cardiff in the past, so it's quite interesting for me to be back in this position of running or facilitating a new project. The urban agriculture idea was sort of started in 2016, when lots of other people were talking about sustainable food, but not particularly talking about urban food growing. So we did some work in 2017 and 2018, and that led to the notion that there was a latent interest in urban food growing as a response to climate change and food insecurity. This was around the time of Brexit, of course. So the premise of the Urban Agriculture Consortium was built on those 2 things: climate emergency, food insecurity, or food poverty, whichever way you like to look at it. And then, of course, the exponential rising in awareness of environmental issues from Greta Thunberg and XR in 2009 sort of accelerated all this before COVID came on the scene. So in the autumn of 2019, we were putting together what's now the consortium, and actually going out and consulting all over the place with everyone we could think of, and building a sort of consensual partnership. It's an unconstituted partnership. So as Maddie said, I'm working for a CIC, which I set up, called Green Future Associates. We are the recipient of the grant from Esme Fairbairn, and the core oversight group that Maddie mentioned is operating in good faith, if you like, to actually promote the idea of something for the common good. It's at the early stages, as Maddie said, but even in the time that we've started operating the programme since the summer, the sort of amount of interest and traction with places across the UK is palpable. You can actually feel it. And I'm just going to give a couple of examples. We're talking to some people in Scotland through the Scottish Community Growing Forum, and a local authority officer from Perth said, "This is fantastic, just timely, exactly what we need. This will enable us to amplify and accelerate this message." In Lancaster, which is one of our Pathfinder places, there's been a citizens' jury, and the citizens' jury has responded to climate emergency by asking the City Council to facilitate the upscaling of urban food production. That's in Lancaster. In Leeds, 2 years ago, there was very little interest or traction from the City Council. They've now commissioned a report on local food growing and climate resilience. And just yesterday, I was reading a confidential report which Maddie's been involved in Bristol, which has been commissioned by the City Council to look at upscaling food production in all the city wards, all 34 wards of the city. And that's been commissioned by the council. It's unofficial, it's not in the public domain at the moment, but it gives you a sign that there's a sort of latent growing interest at a grassroots level, but crucially with local authority traction as well. There's also other people involved in this now. Obviously, Sustainable Food Places have done a great job over the years. Sustain have done a fantastic job of raising awareness of all these issues and working on Brexit, but Sustain and Land Workers Alliance and Sustainable Food Places have just got some funding for a project which is entirely complementary to ours, called Fringe Farming. And just the other day, they've advertised for a peri-urban food policy officer. So we'll be tying in with them. And then in a sort of lateral thinking way, we've made links with the Town and Country Planning Association, who are looking at a concept called the 20-minute neighbourhood, which is about relocalisation of everything. And we got in touch with them and said, well, have you got a food growing component in your 20-minute neighbourhood? No, we realised that was an omission. Good timing. So we're going to be talking to them. And Maddie, I'll hand over to her, has developed a couple of other links with dynamic procurement and Church of England. So do you want to just say a bit about that, Maddie?
Sure, yeah. So the cities and towns that we're working with in a cluster at the moment in the north of England, Middlesbrough, Lancaster, Sheffield and Leeds, we've been gathering a lot of information from them about their needs and opportunities, their strengths and the challenges around this issue of upscaling, regenerative growing and all the different facets of that. And a couple of the strands that have come out, which are commonly felt everywhere, are access to markets and access to land. So a couple of the strands that I'm kind of developing now are around dynamic food procurement. And there's a fantastic new team, the Dynamic Food Board, which is supported by the Crown Commercial Services, so the government. It's all about short supply chains and enabling small SMEs, small producers, to supply public institutions. So there's some amazing work going on there, and they're doing a pilot of that, a regional pilot in the southwest is starting, and we're hoping that there'll be a northern regional pilot next, building on the lessons that they're learning in the southwest. So that's really exciting, and something that we can work on as a cluster, as a collective of places. And you know, we're here to help sort of enable that co-working. The other is made a link with the network of diocesan environment officers for the Church of England, who have stewardship kind of responsibility over the church's glebe lands, as they're called, those that were taken off the monasteries and given to priests, and now they're with the responsibility of the diocese. And they seem to be a network of very dynamic, switched on people, the diocesan environment officers, who are really keen to look at how they use their assets for the service, to be of service to the earth and people. And so there's some initial conversations going on there, and linking up the needs of each of the cities that we're working with. What do they need land for specifically? So in Lancaster, it's about farm start and the graduates of farm starts needing small parcels of land. So that'll be what we're talking about with the church and diocesan officers in Lancaster. So that's these are just some of the kind of threads that we're nurturing at the moment.
Okay, and just to let you know, we got the grant from Esme Fairbairn. It's £200,000 in total over 3 years, and it sounds like a lot of money, but as you can imagine, it doesn't go very far. So we're hoping to work with our colleagues in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland to access some more localised funding in those countries, and also to try and get more money in England as well, because as Maddie said, we're working in the north, but at the moment we're not working in the south of England. So one of the things we've been asked to do is to develop a typology of urban growing spaces. So this is my Blue Peter job. I'm old school, as you can tell. And this is a very, very crude attempt to start a typology of urban growing. So there's a diagonal line. The top of the diagonal line is what you might call individual and community activity. And underneath the diagonal line is what you might call more commercial and semi-enterprise level. So if you start in the middle on the left, you get demonstration plots of local authorities, community gardens, window boxes, parks and city farms. Moving out into the suburbs, you get more allotments and community gardens. And then we've got what I call agroecology incubators and demonstration sites, which might be run by an NGO, but moving into enterprise, and also incubators for other projects. And then if underneath the diagonal line, you've got what you might call commercial. So you've got the high-tech growing and vertical camp in buildings, under buildings, on rooftops. You've got farm starts, which are more enterprise from inception, traditional small holdings, which still exist in a lot of towns and cities. Then you've got the CSAs, which cross over in between the two. So that's part commercial, part enterprise, part community, and then moving out into small and medium enterprises, county farms and commercial farms. So that's a very crude starting point, and we'll be working that up into a more professional model in the future. So that's our, it's early days, and we're very interested in building coalitions and partnerships and linking in with anybody who's interested in this. It's, as I said earlier, it's for the common good. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Thanks. And we've got some really, thanks everyone for introducing yourselves. I'm trying to read through all of them. It's great to see what range of people there are here. We've got a few minutes if anyone's got any questions at the moment for Jeremy.
Well, there's one there. Is dynamic food procurement UK-wide or just England? Okay. We talked to them yesterday, and my impression is that at the moment they're concentrating on southwest England, but obviously with an intention to roll that out in future. As Maddie said, they're working with the Crown Procurement Services, Crown Commercial Services. Gary, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to come in. There's some focus areas in Wales around food procurement at the moment, Carmarthenshire, Ceredigion being a priority for Welsh Government at the moment, and that's being rolled out relatively rapidly by Welsh Government themselves. You may, or some of you may know that we have, or had, a national procurement service within Wales. That's now being effectively disbanded and coming back into full ownership of Welsh Government. So the sort of time, and that's obviously linked to Brexit and all sorts of other things. But they've set up a couple of really strong focus areas, and I'm sure others within the conference are talking about bits about how that might work. So there's definitely activity starting in Wales. It's focused on sort of mid-West Wales at the moment as a pilot area around local authorities and larger institutions and what they could deliver for a better food procured system. So it's worth keeping an eye on some of that. Jane Davidson's involved in that, as well as some of the other speakers that you've been listening to perhaps this morning.
Thanks, Gary. Somebody's asked a question. Can I ask why the focus is so much on urban areas?
That's a very good question, isn't it? I mean, I looked at this from a UK-wide perspective, and apologies, I know that a lot of Wales is very, very rural, but the majority of the population of the UK live in urban areas. It's a massive proportion of people live in urban areas. And our feeling is most people who live in urban areas are disconnected from nature. They're disconnected from where their food comes from. And the idea behind city farms back in the 1970s and 80s, which is still going strong, community gardens, was an attempt to empower people in places where they live. The fact that we've still got allotments, however much under threat they've been, is fantastic. I've got my own. I've had it for over 25 years now. And what the Urban Agriculture Consortium notion is that level of food production that's carried out at those projects is marginal, minimal amount of food, apart from the individual families who are involved. So we were saying, would it be possible to upscale food production to a significant level? And the figure that's being commonly used now is 15% of fruit and vegetable produced in and around urban areas. That figure's being used in Bristol, in Sheffield, and other places. But part of it, because of COVID, is because we can see now that there's a great interest in relocalizing food, relocalizing places. As I said, the 20-minute neighborhood idea, people working from home, perhaps not commuting anymore, not so much, wanting a sort of more sane way of life, if you like, and that's being reflected in wanting safer streets for kids to walk and cycle in. But also, we think if there was a connection with food growing as well as parks within 20 minutes, within half an hour of where everyone lived, there begin to be a sort of more organic relationship with where your food comes from. And, you know, we're not utopian. We don't think that all of a sudden we're going to grow all our food in Bristol for everyone. but it's a way of moving the agenda to a more localised, sustainable food system in the future.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks. I'm going to move on to Elizabeth in a second. Thank you all for your questions. There's one that Joanna has asked about food banks transitioning to locally sourced healthy food. I'm going to, I just wanted to highlight that, but maybe that's one that Elizabeth can help to answer after she's spoken as well. So just moving on to Elizabeth Westaway. Passing over to you, Elizabeth, to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maddie. I'll just put my screen share up.
And again, if you have questions for Elizabeth, please put them in the...
All right, just checking. Can you see my PowerPoint, Maddie?
Yeah, yeah, can do. Yes.
Hang on. Right, so that's okay.
And again, people can minimise and move around the drop down thing with all our faces in on the right if you want, if it's in the way of the slide.
Okay, so I'll just start by introducing myself. I'm actually an international public health nutrition specialist, work mainly in developing countries, but in the last few years doing more in this country, and really been very interested, probably passionate about permaculture when I discovered it in 2016. So that's sort of been a big drive behind what I'm working on and have been working on over the last few years, which is an interest in nutrient density of food, raising nutritional quality of food so that we have food systems for nutrition and health, and obviously raising the agenda of health within food and farming systems. So here goes. Right, so I just want to begin with some Welsh statistics, and even before COVID, almost a quarter of people in Wales were living in poverty, and approximately 3 in 10 children were also living in poverty. We've got over 60% of adults are overweight or obese, and this figure is rising by 10,000 annually. 7.6% of the population over 17 years of age are living with diabetes, and this is the highest prevalence in the UK and Western Europe. We've also got health inequalities are increasing with deprivation. Now, many causes of non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, diabetes and cancers are diet related, and importantly for that, in relation to fruit and vegetable consumption, only 24% of adults report consuming 5 portions of fruit and veg a day. So to improve diets, the entire food system must be considered to ensure health, equity and environmental sustainability. So to improve what we're eating, we need sustainable, healthy diets. And there is a session after this that is also talking about sustainable, healthy diets. So these are dietary patterns that promote all dimensions of individuals' health and well-being, have low environmental pressure and impact, are accessible, affordable, safe and equitable, and are culturally acceptable. And they also support the preservation of biodiversity and planetary health. So this is really important. And in this way, sustainable healthy diets comprised of healthy and sustainably produced local seasonal food, ideally organic, can improve human nutrition and health outcomes. Now, health begins with food, and healthy food begins in the soil. So sustainable healthy diets can also support the urgent paradigm shift to nature-friendly regenerative growing practices such as agroecology, regenerative organic agriculture and permaculture that actually restore soil health, increase the cycling of nutrients, carbon and water, and improve environmental sustainability, such as in relation to the climate emergency. So it's really essential that healthy and sustainably produced food that nourishes is our right. And this is particularly important with COVID, when we need to be eating high quality, nutrient dense food to boost our immune systems. Also, healthy and sustainably produced food needs to be the most accessible, affordable, desirable, and easy choice for all. So here's some principles of low impact sustainable healthy diets that can help mitigate climate change, and this is taken from a 2017 World Wildlife Fund report, Eating for 2 Degrees. I'm just going to sort of really skip over this quite quickly. Eat more plants, eat a variety of food, waste less food, moderate your meat consumption, so eat less but better quality meat. Buy food that meets a credible certified standard, such as fair trade, pasture for life, organic, or from the leaf mark, and also eat fewer foods high in fat, salt and sugar, and drink plenty of water. Now you might find this quote quite interesting from Masanobu Fukuoka. The ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation and perfection of human beings. So, what if, instead of a food system that makes us sick, we have one that aspires to improve our health and well-being, where healthy soil equals healthy plants, equals healthy food, equals healthy people. However, we also need a healthcare system that supports health and prioritises the importance of food. And in this regard, I want to share the work of the Rodale Institute in the US, which recognises this need in their recent paper, The Power of the Plate, the case for regenerative organic agriculture and improving human health. Now, they propose a new vision called regenerative healthcare, which is defined as a system in which farming and healthcare work together to inform a prevention-based approach to human and environmental health. Rather than relying on toxic chemicals to solve agricultural issues and pharmaceutical intervention to manage disease, regenerative healthcare aims to prevent disease through an organic whole foods plant-forward diet that begins on farms that work in harmony with nature. Now, the report has 9 recommendations to create meaningful change in our food and healthcare systems, and they include implement more localised integrative health initiatives. Examples provided include subsidised food boxes, CSA programmes, or community gardens at healthcare locations. Now, this is similar to what's happening in the UK with social prescribing. Now, social prescribing is not a new concept. It's been around for years, with many people describing it as the community development approach to health and well-being. It's a growing movement that connects people with a wide range of non-clinical programs, services and events in their local community. It's a service that goes beyond the GP's prescription pad, and it's designed to support people with a wide range of social, emotional or practical needs. Yeah, I'm just going to be finishing fairly soon. And it's a more than medicine approach, as the majority of long-term conditions can be prevented by lifestyle change alone. So the second quote here is from a recent paper in the BMJ on social prescribing, authored by Michelle Howarth and Mike Hardman of the University of Salford and others, that concludes that gardens and gardening can improve the health and well-being for people with a wide range of health and social needs. And the benefits of gardens and gardenings could be used as a social prescription globally for people with long-term conditions. So my last slide, I'd like to showcase 2 community urban food growing projects. The first is the Grow Well project in Cardiff, and it's a partnership with the Southwest Cardiff GP cluster, operating 2 community garden sites, one of which is at Lansdowne Surgery. You have GPs and other frontline NH staff from across the 11 surgeries in the cluster referring patients. And the sessions are run by a professional with a Now, the second food growing project, which is really interesting, is in the southwest of England, is the Grow, Share, Cook project. And this is commissioned by Plymouth City Council and Plymouth Community Homes and delivered by Tamar Grow Local and Food is Fun. The project provides free bags of seasonal fruit and vegetables and cooking sessions to people experiencing food insecurity or those at risk of type 2 diabetes wanting to change to healthier diets. And this is through a social prescribing project from a GP
30 seconds.
with vegetables sourced wherever possible from local producers, including community growing initiatives. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It's absolutely fascinating. And do look up Tamar and the Plymouth Eat, Grow,
It's Eat, Grow, Cook.
Eat, Grow, Cook. Thank you. And Grow.
Oh, sorry, it's not. Grow, Share, Cook.
Grow, Share, Cook.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And also just noting that there's a couple of links that have been shared in the chat, the plantritionproject.org and one further up, which was a One Planet Cardiff link to a consultation. But I'd like to just come back with the question that was raised before, Elizabeth. How can we help food banks transition to locally sourced healthy food rather than relying on supermarket surplus? Perhaps you could speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, that is, I mean, for me, it's a real worry because we shouldn't be relying on food banks in this country. I mean, it's very reminiscent to when I was working abroad, and you rely, you know, in developing countries, when you're relying on food aid, rather than people being able to meet their own household security and nutrition security needs. So I think it, yeah, it's very hard. I think there do need to be schemes to enable more people or organisations to get into local growing of food, to access land locally. I know in Swansea, where I am, there's a local CSA that was actually looking into expanding its activities in a part of Swansea that is actually more, you know, more socially deprived area, to increase the opportunities for people to have access to local, fresh, seasonal food through a veg box scheme. So that's, you know, potentially a really exciting area, but obviously this needs to be upscaled, you know, to enable more people in urban areas to be able to have that access. I don't know if any other members of the, you know, other speakers on the panel have other thoughts around this question.
Maybe I could come in on that, Elizabeth. Thank you. This is Nick Weir from the Open Food Network. And yes, I completely agree, food banks are a sticking plaster and we need urgently to work away from dependency on food banks. But at the moment, they are necessary. And one of the ways we are feeding local produce into the food banks is using the Open Food Network, and I'll be talking about that later. But one of the successful projects that's using the Open Food Network system sources local produce, surplus produce. Adam just put up a comment about hobby growers and allotments with surpluses. Those can all be fed into a central system, either at a charge or free of charge. And a local project that I'm involved in, it's called the Long Table, brings in people who are out of work, maybe homeless, and they collectively cook this produce. They then freeze it. They freeze the ready meals, and then the ready meals are made available on a donations basis to people who want to either take the food without paying a donation, or people who want to pay forward and actually pay for somebody else to have a meal from the Long Table. So there are some very creative projects like this that tackle the multiple issues of joblessness, homelessness, raising the skills of people who need to get back into employment, but also providing food from local surpluses to local people. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, great. And just to add very briefly, I do some work for the Gleaning Network, and sometimes they've found that it's just as simple as food banks don't have refrigeration, the necessary refrigeration or storage, and they would like to. So that's a good starting point to say, do they actually in practical terms have capacity to store it? And how might you address that? It's sometimes that smaller picture stuff as well as the bigger picture. Yeah. Nick.
Sorry, buddy. Just to come back in on that. So the final step of the long table process is a network called Freezers of Love, and these Freezers of Love are a network of freezers around the local area, which might be, you know, somebody's personal freezer in their garage, or it might be a community centre that's got freezer space. And then these frozen meals are delivered to these pickup points all over the community. And then the Open Food Network system makes these available online. There's a buddy system for people who don't have online access to actually access these meals. But there's these freezers of love that spring up all around the long table projects, which is quite a nice concept.
Brilliant. Pearl has just shared they're doing a bit using the Share Local platform, but she's very keen to coordinate with others. So there's a link that she's posted there for Share Local Wales.
Sorry, yeah, Maddie, I just wanted to say, I think the, you know, the link with social prescribing of urban like food growing projects and is, you know, a big step. I think, you know, to get a lot of the GPs and the link workers on board, then that will sort of help as well, because there's, you know, so many. Well, as I said in the journal article that I mentioned, I mean, there's so much evidence there to show that, you know, social prescribing, you know, has many positive benefits, not only for mental health and well-being, but for physical health and around these diet-related non-communicable diseases. So the work that Tamar Grow Local is doing, where they're linking like the food growing of agroecological food, which is, you know, more nutritious than conventional growing, with patients at risk of type 2 diabetes through GP social prescribing. That's really exciting initiative. So I think watch that space.
And ask your doctor, if you're ever at the doctor's, ask for it. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. That's brilliant. I'd like to move on now to Gary. Gary Mitchell is very involved in so many amazing initiatives pushing the food, the future of food agenda forward in Wales, and really, really pleased that he's also part of the oversight group for the Urban Agriculture Consortium. So really pleased to hand over to you, Gary, to talk about the potential for urban agriculture in Wales.
Thanks, Maddie. Jeremy and Elizabeth going before me. Bore da, croeso, and diolch yn fawr. I think great to see so many of you there. Some friendly, familiar faces and names, which is fantastic, but perhaps more exciting, plenty of people I haven't connected with before or are not aware of. Seeing some of the messages in the chats is really inspiring about what's going on out there as well, but also picking up some of the message of slight feeling of frustration, perhaps in some areas of, we know we can do more, but the support perhaps isn't there, or we're banging our heads against brick walls and not getting very far. So I think my presentation is just about answering some of those questions in a way, showing you what's going on across Wales already, showing the community movement that's really established itself in a really strong location, or a strong foothold in Wales. And I think we've only got to look back perhaps 10 years ago. Social farms and gardens started sort of operating in Wales with a bit more capacity, a bit more emphasis. And when we first started supporting community gardens in Wales, and Jeremy actually sort of led the team back then, there were 8 existing community gardens that we knew of. And I think the picture today is really quite amazing. As Maddie said, you can sort of move your images of people around so that you can see the slide if it's in your way. But as of yesterday, but these figures have changed even today, and I'll give you some of the very brief updates, but we've been doing a bit of work for Welsh Government on mapping the activity of community food initiatives across Wales. And I know several of you have mentioned that, yeah, it's not just urban and peri-urban settings. And I think there is a huge diversity right across Wales. So we're now aware of 546 allotment sites, 239 community gardens, which I think is a staggering figure, 73 community orchards. Actually, there's another 59 coming this November, December as well. So that's over 130 community orchards across Wales. 34 community supported agriculture initiatives, 33 brand new Keep Wales Tidy food growing gardens. That's one in every local authority and a little bit more. There's 28 incredible edible projects across Wales. That's almost the same number as across England. We've got 5 new controlled environment agriculture projects starting this year. That's the sort of future food movement idea test bed, if you like. We've only got 2 city farms, and I think that shows a bit of a picture across Wales, really. We've only really officially got 3 cities, Swansea, Wrexham, Cardiff, and some people dubious about whether Wrexham's a city or not. Anyway, so I think we do have to understand that the urban and the peri-urban is a different language in most of Wales, not all of it. Clearly, we've got some huge areas of dense populations, but actually, as soon as you spread out above that M4 corridor, the picture's really quite different. We've also got a number of edible playgrounds, but actually Welsh Government asked us to map those, and we had to say no, because we're aware of almost every single primary school, certainly in the rural settings, having at least some element of a community or a food growing element to it, composting corners, things like that. So we had to decline that request. And just to sort of highlight, I think, how we've got to that quite amazing picture across Wales. A lot of what we and our partners do is really advocate for the movement of community food growing, the benefits it can deliver for planet and people. Almost all of those sites will be operating on a sort of organic principles, nature-friendly growing techniques, all those sorts of things. But we lobby as hard as we can as well, and that's through our sort of CYNHADLEDD connections. Social Farms and Gardens really tries to put a lot of its resources towards policy change, and policy change for the better for agroecology type systems. We've done a lot of work around planning policy change, sustainable farming in our land, obviously topical at the moment. We sit on groups like the Green Infrastructure Task Force, we sit on the Controlled Environment Task and Finish Group, Environment Scrutiny Committee, so we go back to ministers and sort of haul them over the coals if we think the direction of travel isn't where it should be. Cross-party food group, and so many more. And I think a lot of that is through really strong partnerships, and it's great to know many of you listening in on the call today. The panelists are all people I know and have worked with for many years, really passionate about what they do. But I think partnerships is how we're going to get more done in Wales, and I think we're pretty good at that. We've got a good ability to connect with our government. We've got a reasonably good ability to influence our government, and obviously elections coming up next year, we're in a strong position to do that. And I'm hoping that the Urban Agriculture Consortium has Wales as one of its sort of focus points, one of its sort of pathfinder groups, and spread that across Wales. So that's it really. I just wanted to give you a full flavour of what's already out there in Wales. There's loads more we could do clearly, and there's loads of issues we need to unlock. I'll put my contact details in the chat as well, so you can get hold of me or the Wales team anytime outside of this call. But thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Gary. That's brilliant. Does anyone have a question for Gary about the national picture that they'd like to ask now? There'll be time for some questions also at the end, I'm hoping. So do make a note of any questions that arise. I haven't got any coming through in the chat at the moment. That's fine. Maybe I will then move on to Nick at the moment. We've got one actually just come through. Do you work with local authorities?
Yeah, and I picked up your comment earlier. We try our hardest to work with local authorities, and some local authorities, I'll be honest, are so much easier to work with. We've got some good exemplar ones. I see there's a lady from Swansea here today. Swansea has been really quite proactive over many years around its community food growing sites, had a whole team around sort of local food, and are still able to keep some of that forward thinking and development going forwards. So Swansea's a good exemplar. Perhaps if I was rude enough to single a single one out, Monmouthshire would be leading the way across Wales in many respects, but particularly around access to land for community food, for growing, for composting, all of those sorts of things. And it sometimes boils down to very strong individuals within local authorities driving change. And I'll be honest, as you move further forward, the picture doesn't look quite so rosy, but we are working. We've got some money out of Welsh Government to create new allotment sites this year, so that's fantastic. And we're targeting Gwynedd County Council, we're targeting Wrexham County Council, and actually in that case as well, we're targeting Swansea, because they were one local authority that decided to relinquish all of their statutory duties around allotments and get rid of it basically and put it out to the community. But doesn't necessarily drive change. They sometimes need the support, so we're actually supporting Swansea as well. And then in other cases, we're working very closely with local authorities around some of our new tech-based food systems. So Wrexham again and Powys in the middle, looking at supporting some community food projects through land transfers. We've got the biggest land transfer happened in Powys across the whole of Wales for community developments. That's 140 acres come into community ownership, and we've started working a lot more with Welsh Government, taking on some, let's say, green spaces that aren't earmarked for development, future housing, future infrastructure systems, and allowing the communities to come in and make much better use of that. So we've had 3 successful land transfers from Welsh Government now out to the community as well.
Thanks, Gary. Fantastic. I'm gonna move on to our next speaker, who is Nick Weir, who is runs the Open Food Network. He's going to be talking about new ways of buying and dynamic food procurement. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Maddie, and bore da. Very good to be here, and really nice to see some old friends on this call. I'd just like to clarify, I don't run the Open Food Network. I'm part of the Open Food Network. The Open Food Network is a global community of farmers and growers and community food enterprises who want to build a better food system. And one of the things we've developed is a piece of open source software that facilitates, it's a toolkit that facilitates the building of resilient local food economies. It builds short food supply chains. It enables farmers and growers to sell their produce direct to the eaters and the buyers who live around them. It also enables the farmers and growers who don't want to sell online to sell through food hubs, through online farmers markets, to distribute through food banks, and there's been a lot of conversation about that this morning. It enables food co-ops and buying groups to buy from wholesalers in bulk and then to split the produce and distribute amongst their members. And probably most importantly, it enables all of these different enterprises to link up with each other. And what we're building is a network that enables the producers to have multiple routes to market, which has been one of the big issues during COVID, is that producers depending on a single route to market suddenly lost their single route and were very quickly needing to reorganize their distribution. But if they can have multiple routes to market through multiple distribution opportunities, and also to distribute each other's food through those distribution outlets, we end up with a much more resilient local food system and much shorter food supply chains. I'm going to switch off my video because my bandwidth is a bit low, and I'm going to start sharing my screen. First thing I want to show you is that network. That's what nationally. Let's zoom in and get a bit more local. Here is what's happening in one part of Wales. You can see that on a tractor symbol, you can actually find out a bit more about the producers and what they're producing, their contact details. If they do have social media links, those appear here on this screen. And you can also see where they're selling. So they're not selling direct, but they are selling through a local food hub, and we'll have a look at that here. This is the food hub they're selling through, and you can see that as a shop symbol. And again, the contact details and a bit more about during the first lockdown. And this food hub is linked up with other outlets. So there's somebody here who's selling seafood direct, but that's linked to this food hub. Another one here. This farm has a shop. It's currently closed, but this is linked to the food hub. So you can see here the multiple options for people to actually get access to that food. So that's what it looks like online. You're very welcome to have a look at this, openfoodnetwork.org.uk, and then it's the maps tab here. But let's have a quick look what it looks like to the shopper. So this is the Haverfordwest shopfront that we just looked at. Again here, the shopper can actually see, let me just scroll down here a little bit. You can see a little bit about the products and their any allergens and their ingredients and so on. And you can also, the shopper can also get a lot of detail about who actually produces this thing. Phone numbers, social media links, and if we scroll down to the bottom, where this product is available. So they do have a shop, but they're not currently selling through that shop, but people can actually buy it through 3 or 4 in that locality. So you can see the sort of richness of the network of distribution opportunities. While we're on the subject of transparency, every product has a price, and the shopper can see how that is broken down. So the producer will receive £2.37 for the donuts. There's an admin fee and a sales fee that's set by the food hub themselves. This is their markup to cover their running costs. There's a packing fee. There may also often be a distribution fee. If somebody else is picking up the donuts and delivering to the food hub, they may charge a distribution fee. But the shopper can see the breakdown of that price. Let me show you very briefly how that works from a producer's point of view. So this is the back end. This is where a producer, once they're registered on the Open Food Network, and we do encourage producers to register. It's completely free to register and set up your products. If you're not selling direct, there's no charge whatsoever for using the Open Food Network. We want as many producers on the platform as possible to make that produce available locally. The only charge is if you do start to sell direct, either as a producer or as a hub, then the Open Food Network asks for 2.4% of your online turnover. But this is where the producer would set up. It takes about 5 minutes to set up your enterprise. You'd then come here and you'd add your product. You'd put the name of the product. Sorry, what products you're selling, whether you're selling by weight or by volume or by item. If you're selling bunches of carrots, what weight you want to sell it in. Oh dear me, that's very unfortunate. Let me just go back there. Sorry about that. That's me trying to go too quickly. The producer then sets a selling price for that product. And the selling price is the price that the producer will receive for that product. And then, as we saw in the previous screen, it's possible to have a markup, which the food hub adds to that to cover their running costs. The producer also sets a stock level, because particularly if they're selling through multiple outlets, it's really important that we don't oversell. And so anybody who has access to sell these products will count down from this one central stock control, and the producer controls the stock.
Okay.
So they will set.
Got about a minute left, Nick.
Okay, thank you. So very quickly, the other thing that the producer will do is give permission. So this is where the permissions screen is driven. So that producer will will put themselves as the producer. They will then choose which hub they want to sell through. So maybe Haverfordwest. And they will then give permission to that hub to add their products to the order cycle. An order cycle being a period during which the shopper or the buyer will place an order for delivery or collection at a time. The producer can also give permission to the hub or to the shop to manage their date. So they can give permission to somebody else to do that for them. Let me end by showing you this screen. I'm going to put a link up to that in the chat, but this just summarizes those options. What do you want to do if you want to use the Open Food Network, and how does the shops and the hubs work? And a little bit down here, there are some quick start guides to actually how to actually set up your shop. I'll put my email address in the chat as well, but really happy to take questions. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nick. Hope everyone was able to hear everything then. It was very visual and well demonstrated, so hopefully no information was lost. Does anyone have a question for Nick at this stage?
So the question, how did you overcome the local attitude of we need to save the high street? Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really, really important issue. We do not want to replace the high street shops. We want vibrant local communities that have local shops selling local produce, and that is a key part of what we do. What we want is to offer those shops an online shopfront to supplement their retail outlet. So shelf space is often limited in a high street shop, and if they want to have an online shopfront, they can actually expand their shelf space infinitely. They can have as many products as they like available online from local producers. The shoppers would go online and order that produce, particularly if it's fresh produce. So, you know, vegetables. You know, if you've got a high street shop selling spinach, and you have the spinach delivered on a Monday, by Friday it's compost. It's not saleable. So if you can have an online shop front that says there is spinach available, the shoppers come and they order their produce. That produce might be from the local producers as well as produce that is actually on the shelves in the shop. So the shopper would order these products in a basket. At a specific point in the week, the shop would send a purchase order out to all the producers and say, okay, this is what's been ordered of your produce this week. The producers would harvest the spinach, prepare the cakes, bottle the beer, whatever needs to be done, deliver the produce to the shop, and the shoppers would then come in and pick up their pre-ordered produce, which would include stuff off the shelves. And at the same time, they would do impulse buying, so they would buy other stuff that is already on the shelves. So what we're finding is that particularly when the shop has social distancing issues and limited number of people in the shop, that actually having an online shop front to supplement the high street does actually improve their turnover. I hope that answers that question. Are there any more questions, Maddie?
I think we need to move on, Nick, at this stage. We're about 10 minutes over. So I'm going to, and there's some really important and interesting questions and comments coming through as well. I just want to acknowledge we're all looking at that too. Thank you for those. I'm going to pass over now to our final speaker, Kim Stoddart of Garden Organic, who's going to be talking about reinventing food growing at home, turning full circle, ditch the decking.
Thank you very much, Maddie. Hello, everybody. It's very apt talking about all things resilience and climate change at the moment. There's a bit of a storm raging outside where I live in West Wales in Ceredigion. I'll give you a bit about my background at first. I am a gardening journalist as well. I write for The Guardian, Telegraph, and I have columns in different publications like Grow Your Own magazine. I've lived in Ceredigion for almost 11 years, beautiful part of the country. Written the climate change garden book here, and I've been writing about all things resilience, climate change, organic gardening for a number of years now, back since about 2012. And Garden Organic is a fantastic organic growing organisation, charity with a long history and credentials. And I've written about them a lot in the past. So I'm really, really delighted to be able to actually be representing them in Wales. They have a massive resource of on-the-ground materials to help people grow sustainably and effectively through their website, which is www.gardenorganic.org.uk. And what we're keen to do as an organisation is actually to work closely with others in Wales just to provide support where we can and do more actually supportive work on the ground with others. So that's very much where we're at right now. And with, I'm here amongst a fantastic selection of speakers. It's great to be part of this. So I think, very much, there's so much need for this right now. There's so much need for people to have the opportunity to grow some of their own produce through, city farms and gardens, community growing projects as much as possible. We're, I think what I'd like to bring across today, I have a few slides that I'd like to show with some sort of practical advice. But I've been talking about climate change gardening for years and used to have to do talks at gardening clubs convincing people. Obviously that's not the case right now, but where we are now in our society with everything that we're experiencing, this perfect storm of climate change, Brexit, and also the pandemic, and through necessity, because we have to keep everyone safe and secure, we are wearing masks. There's a massive disconnect because that has to be the case. So from a mental health perspective, Elizabeth was talking about social prescribing. Just as individuals, we need this more than ever. We need the opportunity to connect with produce, with nature as much as we can. The opportunity to take a seed and to nurture that on your windowsill, even over winter, into some salad leaves. I've got some props here as well, just to bring this alive a little bit, into some salad leaves that you can grow. It is magical, and it's a way of actually getting that close and connected to your food, and a way of actually feeling like you're doing something positive in light of all these things that are happening, because so much is happening to us right now that it all feels very much out of control. And from a well-being perspective, from a food security perspective, from a everything perspective, we really need this. I mean, this is a personal view, but I firmly believe that growing some of your own food is actually, it's what we're meant to do. It's actually in our DNA. That sort of connection provides a sense of well-being that so much in modern society does not. So I think it's incredibly important ultimately. So ultimately, we're very keen to connect with people across Wales and to provide support where we can. We have loads of fact sheets and advice on organic growing, lots of videos that we're happy to share. I'm going to give you a few slides now on climate change gardening in itself, but also just to mention, I do a lot of work actually across Wales, teaching all things resilient climate change gardening, and I'm actually doing a webinar with the Centre for Alternative Technology on Thursday. If anyone's interested, it's free to attend, and I'm doing some webinars with the National Botanic Gardens of Wales and their Growing the Future project as well. But I'm not very technologically savvy with file sharing, but I'm just gonna give that a whirl now because I'd like to show you, it's just an opportunity to show you some nice pictures of produce as well, just to get you all very excited about this. So bear with me a second. Jane is there in backup in case this doesn't quite work. Here we go. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Right, let's try again. If not, I can just keep talking and use some of the props that I have here, but let's try again.
I have got it here if you need it.
Yeah, Jane, do you mind actually? It's probably easier if that's okay.
You can see your desktop now, Kim.
Got it?
Yeah.
Perfect, there we go. It's all about building, with climate change, it's about building resilience in the gardener. And for me, it's resilience overall is important. So being technology savvy is also important. But homegrown is more important than ever. It's an important part of the mix as well. That I think, if we look back to the early part of the pandemic, more people than ever started growing some home produce. There were massive surges of seed sales, and a lot of the websites actually had to put in queuing systems to actually deal with the amount of people interested in growing some of their own produce. So this is a way of actually feeling that you're doing something positive with climate change and everything that's happening right now. You know, it saves money, there's no plastic packaging from plot to pay, and the taste is just, you know, you can't compare an out-of-season bought strawberry from a local supermarket to a strawberry that you've grown, you've picked fresh on a warm summer's day. Just like I say, it's really nice thinking about warm summer's day and a very wet, stormy November day. But it's, yeah, there's no comparison, and it's, you know, it's also the quality of the food is unsurpassable. There are so many threats of climate change, and it's no longer growing as usual. The issue with a lot of our current growing methods is that it's all about trying to control nature, keeping it in its place, which are very much based on Victorian house, country house principles of gardening. If you looked before that, people worked with nature automatically. There's an example of a medieval workers' garden at St Fagans, and there's lots of seed saving, garden organic work with various Oh, thank you. Right, I'll speed up. You know, garden organic work with a lot of partner gardens across Wales, and with St Fagans, they're part of their heritage seed library and their seed guardians. So very much about working with nature, because nature ultimately holds a lot of the answers. My gardens in West Wales flooded back in about 2013. So this first got me onto the journey of especially really researching things that could be done to help. Building resilience, again, as we sort of said in the description, ditch the decking, you know, slow it, sink it, spread it. You want to allow water to try and move away, to flood away into the ground. There's lots of things you can do, like using trees and shrubs, long grass. Effectively, it's about allowing nature to move in, not digging, trying to boost the soil. You know, the soil is the heart and soul of your gardening effort. There's connection there between the well-being of your plants and also the nutrient.
To round you up, Kim, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Seed saving, I just want to mention as well. Seed saving, we have the Heritage Seed Library at Garden Organic, and it's really important to try and complete the natural gardening cycle where you can by saving some of your own seed. We're keen to boost more Welsh heritage varieties of seed to the benefit of Wales. It's one of the most empowering things you can do from a gardening perspective, to actually just save some of your own seed. It feels fantastically great. And finally, just to reiterate the whole well-being element as well, it's just this connection is so incredibly important. It's food security, but from a mental health perspective, it makes you feel so fantastically good.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kim, and thank you everyone. We will get this Zoom room closes on 11:30, so I just wanted to keep back a few minutes. We've run a little bit over, but just to sort of, by way of summary, it's amazing how all the strands of life converge in when we talk about food now. And it didn't used to be the case. So we're seeing conversations about housing and in relation to, you know, land use. What is the, and food is a land use issue, and it hasn't been seen as such in many ways till now. People are talking about economic justice and universal basic income, and that leads us to conversations around investing in, what about investing in land-based livelihoods? So it's going right from the macro and then right down into the micro of the soil and the seed and the things that sustain us and bring us to life. And I just wanted to, just an opportunity for anybody, one of the speakers or anyone else, to kind of give us a closing comment. Please just step in.
Well, if I could just say thanks very much, everyone. These events are really tricky to organise. I appreciate the people from the conference have actually put in time behind and everybody's still learning the technology. No doubt we'll get all very used to it by the middle of next year. But also it's, you know, it's a rare opportunity to be able to speak to 51 people, I think, are in this session now. As Gary said, some familiar faces, some new. And the overriding message is, wow, what a lot is going on in Wales, and fully accepting the rural hinterland as well as the urban conurbations, although Wrexham Football Club's now going to become a global force, Gary, I understand. You know, it's just inspiring to be part of this network and people making all these connections and actually talking optimistically and positively. And echoing what Kim said, I just put in the chat, I plant my tomato seeds on Christmas Day. I've been doing it for the last few years. It sounds bonkers, but actually it's a really therapeutic, optimistic thing to do. It's the middle of winter, everybody's stuck indoors. Plant half a dozen tomato seeds, put them on a south-facing windowsill, and you get tomatoes early in the year. So thanks, Maddie, for coordinating and hosting, and any other questions, please let us know.
Thank you, Jeremy. Anyone else like to offer anything? Yes, Kim.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to everybody for being involved in this. And just really, you know, Wales is such a fantastic country. I'm so glad to have lived here for the past almost 11 years. I am surrounded by fantastic neighbours and people doing the most amazing things. And I just think with everything that's happening right now, the more we can work together collaboratively, the better it is. We're all in this together, effectively.
Can I just chip in as well, Maddie? Just as I mentioned in my presentation, the Open Food Network is a global community. It's in 19 different countries, with a lot of new countries in the process of deploying, particularly since the pandemic hit. And we did recently, last month, we did a global gathering where we got together a Zoom call with people from all of these 19 countries. And people were deeply impressed by Wales and what's happening in Wales, things like the Future Generation Act, and how important that is that we build food systems now that will be there to make sure that the people who follow on from us have safe food systems. And so there is a huge amount of respect for Wales from the global Open Food Network community.
Thank you, Nick. Okay. Anybody else like to chip in? And let's see if there's anything anyone sees in the chat as well that want to.
I think Elizabeth's wanting to speak. Do you need to unmute, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I just added it in the chat, actually. It was just that we've got a great, you know, people that aren't familiar with the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. I think, it is so supportive of, you know, potentially transforming the food and farming system in Wales. One of the 7 wellbeing goals is a resilient Wales. I'll just read it out. A nation which maintains and enhances a biodiverse and natural environment with healthy functioning ecosystems that support social, economic and ecological resilience and the capacity to adapt to change. So, you know, we have that, which is fabulous.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you. Yeah, and just recognising how we are all, you know, deeply programmed to work with the cycles of nature, and the more we tune into that, the more we can unlock those parts of ourselves and our collectively see how we can bring all of these strands together as a community. Is the way that this is going to work, and we are converging. We're very much converging, all of us. So thank you everyone so much for being here. Thank you for all your brilliant comments and questions. Thank you, speakers, very much for your time and sharing your knowledge and experience with everybody. So have a lovely rest of conference, and good luck with everything you do. Thanks very much.